Language is a vital part of our society. It is an irreplaceable way on every culture, and it helps us be unique as individuals. For these reasons, it is really important to understand the theories and the history of psycholinguistics. The groundbreaking discoveries of Wundt, Lordat, and Wernicke have paved the way for an extremely advanced knowledge on the way we live our whole lives. Along with my partner, Maria Laura Sardi, I am Maria Jose Madrigal, and this is Psycholinguistics. Psycholinguistics is the study of mental aspects of language and speech. In other words, it's the multiple ways language can be represented and processed in the brain. A branch of both linguistics and psychology is a part of cognitive science field. The emergence of psycholinguistics as an academic discipline is regularly linked to an influential seminar at Cornell University in 1951. Davis Carroll says that psycholinguistic work is based on two questions. The first one is what knowledge of language is needed for us to use language. In a sense, we must know a language to use it. But most of the time, we are not aware of this knowledge. And the second question is, what cognitive processes are involved in the ordinary use of language? Such things as writing a letter, reading a book, talking during a conversation, even listening to music. These things, although we do it as easily or as often, we'll find out that during these activities, cognitive processes are occurring. As said before, psycholinguistics seek to understand how language is done. However, language processing requires us to understand how these linguistic concepts interact with other human processing aspects to enable language production and comprehension. Psycholinguistics base its ideas from areas such as phonetics, phonology, semantics, syntactic, in short, pure linguistics. There's a constant exchange of information between psycholinguistics and neurolinguistics. These last ones study how language is represented in the brain. The arrival of neuroimaging opened new perspectives for linguists, since it became possible to look at the neural mass activity. Studies of brain processes can complete behavioral results, and in some cases, can lead to direct information of the basis of psycholinguistic processes. Now that we have learned a bit of psycholinguistic history, let's talk about the ones who helped shape it.
Wilhelm Wundt is known as the father of experimental psychology and the founder of the first experimental psycholinguistic laboratory in Leipzig, Germany in 1879. He says that there is a special field that deals with the link between the mind and the body, meaning that he used language to study the mind itself. Some scientific methods that had been promising in German physiology can now be applied to some issue that had been beyond the scope of experimental science. Wundt limited scientific psychology to only those inner phenomena which can be studied using objective and experimental science. He wrote at length about language acquisition, comprehension, production, sign language, and reading, all of which remain topics of interest today. Also, he developed a theory of speech production using the sentences as the unit of analysis, and thought of production as a sequential process that begins with a complete thought that becomes sequentially organized and articulated. The comprehension process was the same as production, but in reverse, proceeding from sound segments to the complete thought. Carl Wernicke was an influential neuropsychiatrist who dealt with all mental illnesses that resulted from defects in brain physiology. He made major discoveries in brain anatomy and pathology, but one of his major findings was that abnormalities could be located in specific regions of the cerebral cortex and thus could be used to determine the functions of those regions. Wernicke was one of the first to conceive brain function as dependent on neural pathways that connected different regions of the brain, with each region contributing a simple sensory motor activity. He, as well, helped demonstrate dominance by either the right or left hemisphere of the brain. What Wernicke is most famous for is establishing what is now known as Wernicke's area in the brain. He was examining a patient who had recently suffered a stroke, and although the man could speak and his hearing was working perfectly fine, he could not understand anything of what was being said to him or written words. Unfortunately, the patient died. However, once he died, he examined his brain and found out that there was a lesion in the rear temporal region of his left hemisphere. Wernicke concluded that this region played a vital role in speech comprehension, and that region of the brain is now called Wernicke's area. Wernicke called the syndrome that the patient had sensory aphasia. However, it is now known as Wernicke's aphasia. Jacques Lordat was a doctor and professor of anatomy and physiology at Université Montpellier in France. After a stroke at the age of 52, he reported that he could not get his words out. He called his problem verbal apnesia or alelia. This was also one of the first self-reports of what we know now as aphasia, since he was a doctor, which most likely allowed him to report in detail what he was going through. During this period, Lauren elaborated on a theory of 10 acts, which lead from thought to sound emission. Lauren defined alelia as a disorder of the material transformation of ideas into sounds, corresponding to impaired memory of previous sounds stored into memory together with a dysfunction of syntactic organization of sound. Lordat also insisted on the integrity of this intelligence and the preservation of his inner thinking, and did not need to speak. He eventually recovered from his aphasia and died 45 years after his stroke at age 95.